All right, cool. Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Dob and Bob, and we are the Behavior Mods, and we are just going to put on a little, a little conversation about some of our favorite passages. So let's check it out. Let's do screen share somewhere. Why does that? Oh, I don't know why it always does that, but here we go. Should be here now. Cool. All right.
Nice.
Cool. So yeah, what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that giving you some time to reflect, we wanted to kind of share some of our favorite passages. So and I guess we'll just talk about them after because I mean the wisdom that are found in these passages are just so great. So, Dobbie, did you want just to rotate or go through the slides normally or?
Why don't we just start with your passages? Maybe
Sweet.
quote, talk about them, and I mean this is real casual, man. We'll figure it out along the way. The
We'll
important
figure it out.
is that people get a sense of the practical application of Stoicism and understand what's behind the quotes because they're so embedded in such rich text that explaining them is it's going to be interesting to see how people respond to these passages. So let's jump into it, Bob.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
All right. So I started, these are my favorite some of my favorite passages. I started with meditations. I started with some Marcus Aurelius. It says, life is more like wrestling than dancing. It must be ready to keep its feet against all onsets, however unexpected. I always like that quote just because I feel like, a lot of times, even today, modern people, children, teenagers these days, they have this mindset of everything is going to be fine. I'm going to be coddled. I'm going to be, I'm going to go through life with just finesse. And it doesn't, sometimes finesse is great, but sometimes it's just strength and training and the responsibility for you to actually kind of tackle your adversary of the vices of negativity that comes into your life.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just really like that. I really think that's a cool one. And then I have some Epictetus. It is the difficulties that reveal what men amount to. And so whenever you're struck by a difficulty, remember that God, like a trainer in the gymnasium, has matched you against a tough young opponent. Wow.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite ones too. It's so for the people who've been with us from the beginning, if you'll recall that Marcus Aurelius was writing to himself and reminding himself that life is more like wrestling. And Epictetus's student Aaron was recording everything Epictetus was saying. And the whole notion of, how to become a Stoic, or when people think of what a Stoic is, this person that's, just kind of cold and emotionalist, what they don't understand is that what the Stoics did was almost seek out difficulty so they could see what they amounted to, so they could see what their training amounts to. It's not like they took pride in their ability to recite other Stoics. The Stoics didn't go around saying, well, I've read Chrysippus and I've done all this. It was about the difficulties that you face that really summed up who you were. How do you judge those difficulties? And if you look at each opportunity as God sending someone to you, you should be thankful, right? That, oh my God, God sent me an arrogant, better yet, God sent me a neighbor who happened to get a brand new fancy car. He must want me to work on not being envious.
Yeah.
How do I work on jealousy? Oh, well, thank God I have a trainer, a tough young opponent in the way of a brand new fancy car. So it is the difficulties that we have to overcome that really reveal who we are, not what we have and our possessions.
Yeah, for sure. And Dobbie, you had a great example when we talked in last session when we had that little quiz about what is a Stoic practice that would be beneficial. And the answer was to find the longest line to stand in at the grocery store, right? To
Yeah.
sort of have that training. Obviously, it's probably not as a tough opponent as, say, the coronavirus or the protests for George Floyd, right? They're more of kind of like it's setting you up for success with that training, kind of step by step, right?
Well, Bob, I would say it depends on your temperament. It depends
Ah, yeah,
on your ability to stand in a line. For some people, standing in a line in a grocery store with certain types of people would drive them crazy. And when I say certain types of people, they could be children, they could be, you name it, whatever your vice is, you could be in a line for an hour with those types of people. It may be difficult. For me, it might be easy.
yeah,
So it's not necessarily that these small exercises are building us up for the bigger ones. They very well could be. But for some people, the big exercise will be standing in line
you're right.
for
Yeah,
people.
I definitely agree with that. And it's important for each of us to sort of look within, as Marcus says, also, in order to see what our weaknesses and what are things that we need to work on.
Right. It's
So that's
different for
good
everybody.
too. Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Good point. And then this one's this is Seneca on benefits. This next quote says, when it comes to action, oh, I love this. Ooh, I just saw it right when I started reading. I remember this one. So this one's, when it comes to action, we can never wait until we have absolutely certain understanding for the entire situation. We only take the path down which we are led by probability. Every duty must follow this path. For this is how we sow, sail, make war, get married, and have children. And all these things, the result is uncertain, but we nevertheless decide to undertake those actions which we think have some hope of succeeding. We go where reason, not where absolute truth, leads us. Wow. Yeah. Lots of good stuff in that one.
It's funny. I'm starting to see the connections between the Stoic um, teachings and all three authors so clearly now. Look at this line. It says, in all things, the result is uncertain, but we nevertheless decide to undertake those actions which we think have some hope of succeeding.
Yes.
Go all the way back to Epictetus. We need to be confident in things external and
Yep.
cautious with things internal. So in all things, in all of these things, the result is uncertain. They're outside of us. But nevertheless, we undertake those actions which we think we have some hope of succeeding in because we've reasoned our chances, our probability of success.
Yeah.
It's such a intertwined philosophical
Yeah.
doctrine that they all share from different perspectives.
Yeah. And we all know nowadays from, the parent seminars, from students, from teaching, from being a dad, everything that I forgot where I was going with that. Never mind. What I was going to say though about this quote is that I like how in the beginning it says, when it comes to action, we can never wait until we have absolutely certain understanding. I feel like a lot of times we do these mental gymnastics, right? We convince ourselves that, for example, every single endeavor that we set out to accomplish, we are absolutely certain that it will end this way or this way. We have this sort of idea about where we want this to go, right? Aristotle calls this the telos, and that's where we get words like teleological and stuff like this. And it's really important to know that we can sometimes, that's not healthy, because a lot of times people obsess over that outcome and they lose focus in the present moment, I would say, for
Yeah,
sure.
no, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like for anxiety, that's a huge thing too. Anxiety is built on this conception of, you know, how are we going to accomplish this and in what ways can it go wrong? Right. And we get fearful of that. So
There's an excellent quote. I don't know if I have it on this PowerPoint by Epictetus that talks about anxiety. I think I used it in the last presentation about when you feel anxious, you should always ask yourself, what is it that I want? And the easiest example to remember is that of the person giving the speech.
Yes. Yep.
So it's not that he wants to give the speech, it's that he also wants the applause. He also wants the crowd to understand. Bob and Dob also want you all to become, Stoics. And it's the lack of our control and the probability that you may not get to be Stoics, or you may not get to where we want you to be, that causes the anxiety. So, the fear that something that we can't control may happen is what causes us to feel like, oh my God, things unpredictable, and what am I gonna do?
Yeah. And what's cool is that you give the example of the speeches, but I think actually it goes through all the three big authors. I think all the authors give some sort of example of, I think there's the lyre player, there's the just a general musician. There's all kinds of different examples that
the orator. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I got a quote about the orator. It's like, no, it's not a quote. I was reading before I came over, and it was the section on to those who, it's like for the people who want to be philosophers, just to sound philosophical and be great.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. All right, go on.
Yeah, that's a I can't wait for that one. Yeah. Getting excited. This is this is for like people who suffer from like depression, or when I've kind of been on a gray day and I've just been kind of just a lot of darkness, dark days, a lot of negativity. I love this quote. Right. This is Seneca.
Got you.
This is Seneca, and it's from Moral Letters, and it is, I think L is 50. I think it's plus 10, 68. It says, maybe someone else can correct me. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, people. Thanks. That you are frequently troubled by the snuffling of catarrh and by short attacks of fever, which follow after long and chronic catarrhal seizures. I'm sorry to hear, particularly because I've experienced this sort of illness myself and scorned it in its early stages. For when I was still young, I could put up with hardships and show a bold front to illness. But I finally succumbed and arrived at such a state that I could do nothing but snuffle, reduced as I was to the extremity of thinness. I often entertained the impulse of ending my life then and there. But the thought of my kind old father kept me back, for I reflected not how bravely I had the power to die, but how little power he had to bear bravely the loss of me. And I love this. I love these next two sentences. And so I commanded myself to live, for sometimes it is an act of bravery even to live. I love that quote, that story, because he starts in the beginning, because catarrh, it's kind of like a sickness of, isn't it like the sickness of the lungs or throat or something like this?
I think so.
It's old school, and that's how they described it. And then he goes into this, he contemplates suicide, and it gives people really kind of a lift out of that darkness. I don't know. There's a lot of cool stuff with this quote.
Bob, I often refer to this quote in my mind when I think about telling my mom something that she may not want to hear. And I refrain from telling her because she may not be able to bear it bravely. And so because she can't handle it, I don't tell her, and I think, God, I love Seneca. Who said this? I commanded myself to live.
Yeah, I commanded myself to live for something. I really get, I love it, because I don't know. We've all been, and I feel like, and this is why we want to bring behavior mods into the schools in general, is a lot of people have, especially in hurting inner city schools and schools that lack resources, there is a lot of trauma from, contemplating suicide. And it's kind of a reality that's coming up in this next generation. I saw a statistic the other day that depression and anxiety and that the results of suicide are just spiking right now, especially for girls. I hear that social media is especially kind of rampant at that. Yeah. I think it's something like 17%. So yeah, this type of stuff. I mean, I don't know, I just felt like if I was down and I reflect on this, I feel like it gives me some power that, wow, there was someone else who lived a long time ago who had the similar feeling, and he, realizes that even living is an act of bravery. You
Yeah.
have to just trudge on.
I'm the same way, man. When I read these quotes and I read these books, I always remember, well, so I'm 43, right? And when I read these passages and quotes, I try to put myself in the same time period that these guys are in, because I think I think this letter that Seneca wrote to Lucilius, I think he was around in his 40s or maybe his 50s. And, when Epictetus wrote, he was, around maybe my age or older. So if you can put yourself in the time and the circumstances and understand why they would even write this stuff, it really helps you understand, like you said, not only did somebody who was suffering like me go through this and survive it, they've given me a different way to look at my entire situation. And oh my God, there were 300 years of other thinking that preceded it that helps not even feel like suicide is an option. Or it's like examples of people who have overcome worse help the meditation process. I used to always sit around and meditate, but I had nothing to think about.
Yeah.
Now I think about Seneca's father and how little power he had to bear bravely the loss of his own son, when I feel like maybe this is too much for me. So I've got great examples now.
Yeah. Great examples for sure.
Yeah.
And this is a quote. My dad used to say this, and I take it away. He said, if you want to improve on something, you always look at people who are better than you. And so that's
Yeah.
kind of like, you know what I mean? You have that example.
Yep.
Yeah, man. So I went back to meditations, and this one's really good. It says, look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will bubble up if thou wilt ever dig. And that's from Meditations. That's a good one.
Yep.
And then I had, all that is in accord with you is in accord with me, O world. Nothing which occurs at the right time for you comes too soon or too late for me. All that your seasons produce, O nature, is fruit for me. It is from you that all things come. All things are within you, and all things move toward you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds very scripture-ish, and
It
has a religious undertone, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And actually the in Hadot's book, The Inner Citadel, he writes that this is actually Marcus like praying out during a really hard time of crisis during the war. So that's kind of an interesting little bit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was pretty kind of a cool commentary. But
I didn't know that.
yeah, if people, for the first quote, look within, I think that especially our parents that have been doing the seminars, I really want to stress that Stoicism and cognitive behavioral therapy in general has to do with, we have a mind, we can think. The power of navigating through life is we have all we need. It's this idea that we are equipped with all we need in order to get through life. Of course, there are, exceptions of mental illness and things like that, but in general, our day-to-day interactions with the world, if we can sort of look within and be introspective and really reflect on stuff, if we have reflective lives, right, then there's a lot of benefits that just occurs. I mean, it's pretty plain and frank in the way that the Stoics write.
Right.
Yeah. And then it's really cool that as far as nature, the Stoics had a very deistic view of the world. They kind of believed in an overarching force. And it's really interesting to see that they equated Zeus, nature, and God as all the same thing. I find that really fascinating. And for me personally, I know that Dobbie he might disagree with me here, but for me personally, I usually take on the nature type of view with like fortune and things. But Dobbie, I don't know. Are you more of a, because you've kind of mentioned me in the past that are you a deistic believer, or do you believe in a kind of an almighty power that guides it?
Honestly, I've always believed, kind of like the Stoics, that God, the deity, and nature are really one and the same. And so I guess this is why Stoicism stuck so well to me, because it just seems natural that this overarching deity and this almighty power and nature and the balance of life and death, it all just seems to be in harmony to me. So yeah, I'm pretty much in accord with how the Stoics view the relationship between the deity and nature. And so living according to nature, living according to God, who is God, and all of that, it just, yeah, that's pretty much who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's really cool is that there's a lot of utility and usefulness in believing this sort of worldview. It's very, when thinking that everything is connected, it's really hard to ignore small stuff in the way
Yeah.
that you used to. You kind of have to be like, oh, the more information I have about the world, the better. You can't just like ignore stuff. It's a more reflective discipline, I feel like.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Mhm.
reflection is always, and that's something that you see in schools today is the kind of the switch towards the sort of mindfulness practice, which
Yeah.
is always a very important thing when coupled with the correct and useful tools of
There you go.
the good practice.
Yeah. And
For
that's the
sure.
difficulty with getting into these schools. What we're introducing is not like anything that's currently on the market. And the validity of what we're saying is, I guess, what we're trying to prove at this point. Because the type of attention that's required to get to this state of, not being bothered or living in accordance with nature does take time and commitment. And Bob, I was talking to my wife, and she was frustrated about the same stuff she was frustrated about 3 weeks ago. And so I said, "What, are you not reading your mantra?" She's like, "No." I said, "What is it that you want?" What I want is not to be bothered by the people at work. I said, "Well, what you want is a great thing." I said, "But do you think grapes turn into wine overnight? Do you think the maturation, the maturing happens instantly, babe? Like, this is what you want is difficult. I mean, to not be bothered by people, to not
Yeah.
come to jealousy, envy, anger, rage. What you're asking for is a lot. And school districts all want this for their students. Parents want this for their kids. People want this for themselves. But as you'll see in some of the next passages that I've listed as my favorite, you won't get there unless you're willing to do the work.
Dobbie, is that a segue into your quote?
I tried to make it one. I hope mine are next.
All right. I tried to make it one.
Yeah.
Nice. I think you had an inkling of what was coming. So here we go.
My degree in marketing and advertising has paid off. I know how to segue into stuff.
There you go, man.
So I picked this passage from Meditations. So this is one of the most popular abbreviated statements from Marcus Aurelius. But here's the entire quote. All right. Our actions may be impeded, but there are no impeding our intentions or dispositions, because we can accommodate and adapt. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes and obstacles to our acting. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. So it's often paraphrased as the obstacle is the way. And, Bob, we talked about this yesterday. So let's frame this for people. Marcus Aurelius is writing this in his own personal journal. He's been reading Epictetus. Stoicism is not an uncommon philosophy, so he knows some of the basics already. So he's telling and reminding himself, as Epictetus tells and reminds us, that if you want to get better at something, you got to go through it, right? If you want to practice not being jealous, then you should go to a car lot and watch the person buy a brand new BMW in front of you and pay cash and see if you can work on being jealous. So the obstacle, whatever's preventing you from not being angry, becomes the way not to be angry. And so this idea that, people often say, well, how do Stoics think? Or, how did Marcus think this way? the way to think like Marcus Aurelius is to adopt this doctrine and really practice what we're training people on. And I think for me, what stands in the way becomes the way has become so clear in the past probably 3 weeks for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes back to like how everything on earth sort of is natural, right? Everything that's obviously happening to us, there's obviously some sort of reason that it's happening if everything is connected. And so if something is standing in our way, it's much more easier to accept the pitfalls or the things that are deemed as negative in our life when we can just say, oh, negative thing happened. I guess that's the way we're going on with our day today. You know what I mean? That's kind of the way that I kind of look at it.
Or you can even say that it's not negative at all.
Exactly. Yep.
It's funny. My wife, she was talking about, my wife has a gap, and she was talking about other women with gaps. And she said, you know, it's looked at as a negative thing and it's a defect and a deformity. And
she has a what?
A gap tooth.
I was like, what?
Yeah. No. Oh.
What? All right. Now I was not on the same page. Okay, we're good. Okay.
So so there's a gap in between her two middle teeth.
Gotcha.
She looked at it like a deformity or a defect. And I said, all it is a space between your teeth. You've attached the negative image to it. You've attached defect. You've attached problem. It's just an extra space. And so even sometimes what we consider obstacles aren't necessarily obstacles.
Yeah.
The next one. And this is taken from Discourses, Epictetus. Is it possible then to derive advantage from all of these things, even from someone who insults you? And Epictetus says, and what advantage does the wrestler gain from his training partner? The greatest. And that man too, who insults me, becomes my training partner. He patience in abstaining from anger and in remaining gentle. This is the third part of the Stoic training. Once you have understood that without, I'm going to quote Frederick Douglass, without struggle, there is no progress, right? It's the same concept. If you want to make progress in areas, you train in them. If you want to bench 350, you start by bench pressing 205 until you get 10 reps. If you want to be a great cook, you start by getting some good tools. So if you want to be a person that's not affected by racism, if you want to be a person who's able to overcome injustice towards you, if you want to be a person who is not moved by the persuasions of a great orator, if those are the things you want to work on, those are the things you should be practicing. The question is, where do you find the practice? Anywhere you want. What do you want to work on? Not being hostile, not hating Black people, not being a big, not being disgusted at Asian people. It's very simple. Go to a beauty supply and work on not being a racist. Be around Black people and accept that they're different. Be around kids if they drive you crazy and practice your patience on working with 3-year-olds. Whatever you're trying to improve upon, find the trainer. Like Bob's first passage, God has sent you a great young competitor or a great young adversary. We're not going to get better. We're not going to reduce. We're not going to end systemic racism until the people in the system view it differently. And so in order to make real change, the mindset of individuals has to change. And until you can offer them a new way of looking at it, we'll have a new program with the same people finding out new ways to place their own agenda within it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I don't think I really need to add any more to that. Cool. All right.
Oh, Seneca. Bob, on the firmness of the wise man. So the wise man. So let me set this up. So Seneca is writing to a friend of his, and his friend is like, hey, man, I've been practicing stoicism, and this is tough. Like sometimes I think it's cool not to want stuff, and then sometimes I got one foot in the world of cool stuff. Like, I don't know. This is difficult. And so Seneca says, well, the invulnerable is not that which is never struck, but that which is never wounded. In this class, I will show you the wise man. So for the past year, Bob, and for the listeners, if people are out there, I've been trying to become this person, this wise man. This individual is the person who has successfully come out of the third phase of this Stoic training. The invulnerable is not the person who stays hiding and never confronts the racist person. The invulnerable is not the person who hides behind a meme and makes comments about situations. The invulnerable is the person who goes into the crowd, who goes into the face of danger. And although he's struck, he's never wounded. And so, when we think about all of these issues that we as a country are facing, we're looking for examples of people who, despite the inequities that have always existed, the injustice that will always exist, who is it that can be hit, wounded, battered, beat, but still not be wounded and come out with justice and sense and not be persuaded by this person's agenda or that person's agenda? This is why Marcus Aurelius was the greatest Roman emperor ever, because the philosophical doctrine of Stoicism almost implants in you this idea that no one's perfect. We all make mistakes. And because of that, I'm going to go into this situation with a different perspective. And I'm not going to judge you because I know that you go wrong inadvertently. I'm not going to be mad at you because you also go wrong inadvertently. So I'm going to go into the face of danger. I used to hide behind my degrees. I used to hide behind whatever ornamental trappings I could find. But now, Bob, I want to go into the face of the crowd, and I might get struck. I might get laughed at. They may call me ridiculous. What is this? But it won't wound me. And because it won't wound me, I'll continue to preach what I and you know is good doctrine and a good way to help people get past their own struggles in life, the stress. It really does melt away.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really like this. It's kind of that growth mindset, right? That's kind of the buzzword that you hear, not in just education, but also in, corporate life and business.
Yeah.
You hear of this sort of growth mindset, right? I just
Right.
feel like a lot of times the language that's used to illustrate this idea is not as effective as Seneca because there's not only is there sort of this idea of growth mindset, but it's put in context of all this other training and all these other principles that lead to this conclusion, which makes it really beautiful. The coherence of the whole thing and the comprehensive nature of it really is, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. And I think that, and you said it really well, that there are going to be injustices, and a lot of times people act on recklessness and they don't act in a way that I just feel like people think that they're invulnerable. They're like, oh, no horrible thing should ever come my way. That's not my lot in life. I need to have sweet sailing for through my life. And a lot of times people get angry in these times of change, in this time of, our leader, as you said, the orator of our country is not helping. He's making it worse. He's fanning the flames, pouring gasoline on all this stuff. And I just feel like there's a lot of loose passions. Everyone's so passionate about stuff. And a lot of times that, unfortunately, leads to crime. It leads to dropout rates in schools. It leads to abuse situations between relationships. A lot of negativity can come from these so quote unquote inflamed passions, for sure. All right. Oh, all right. Longer one. Nice.
Seneca of A Happy Life. Let me see. Got to reduce our screen so I can read the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. I had to do
Let
this
me see.
too.
Which one is this? Of A Happy Life. Okay. What answer are we to make to the reflection that pleasure belongs to the good and bad men alike, and that bad men take as much delight in their shame as good men in noble things? This is why the ancients bade us to lead the highest, not the most pleasant life, in order that pleasure might not be the guide, but the companion of right thinking and honorable mind. For it is nature whom we ought to make our guide. Let our reason watch her and be advised by her. To live happily, then, is the same thing as to live according to nature. What this may be, I will explain. If we guard the endowments of the body and the advantages of nature with care, and fear and fearlessness, as things soon to depart and given to us only for a day, if we do not fall under their dominion, nor allow ourselves to become the slaves of what is no part of our own being, if we assign all bodily pleasures and external delights the same position which is held by auxiliaries and light armed troops in a camp, if we make them our servants, not our masters, then, and only then, are they of value to our mind. So this, for the audience we're trying to reach, I think this passage speaks most directly to them. And probably people in general. We have really become a society, and maybe we've always been a society who have been obsessed with things that give us pleasure, whatever they are, in whatever form. And what Seneca's saying is, as such, we become dependent on these things. We become dependent on nice clothes. We become dependent on a nice house. We become dependent on whatever. And as a result, we become slaves to those very things. And they use us rather than we use them. So for the generation nowadays, to convince a kid that his outfit isn't the most important thing about him is going to be a stretch. But following Stoic practices, you really learn to devalue those things because you understand that the reason you're valuing them in the first place is because of the opinion you think other people will have about you as you have them. For example, my car really became a decorative piece of me because I expected people to be impressed by it, not impressed by me. And so if you want to practice having things that are valuable to your mind because you know how to use them, give up those things. Bob, I went for 7 months and I think I wore the same outfit 4 days in a row every week. And I wanted to practice being resistant to people talking about me because I knew people were saying things about me. But I intentionally wore the same gray pants, the same blue shirt, because I wanted to show people that none of this outside stuff mattered to me. And I was able to take the laughing, the snickering, the questions, and I gave it all up. And my external delights were no longer important. It was how I was judging the view of people that mattered to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like this quote because it makes me, when talking about like the advantages of nature and sort of, it seems like what you did too, Dobbie, is kind of go to luxury. And we had this big discussion about what is luxury versus pleasure, because those two have different definitions. One of the things that I've definitely learned this from Epictetus. One of the cool things that I've learned, I don't know if it's cool, I guess there's kind of a discomfort that comes with it, is the idea that oftentimes people who are in less fortunate positions or less advantaged positions that don't have the ability to buy luxuries, I felt that in my life when I was that person in a certain thing, when I weighed 310 pounds, and I was kind of in that position of kind of negative self-image about myself. In a way, I had less stress in that position than, say, you know, someone who's performing for a supermodel agency or for a bodybuilder contest. There's less, I feel like the more extra stuff that you give, the more adornments, the more luxury that you have, the more time that you have to devote to its upkeep in order to have that reputation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And when I was, you know, when I first started my career, I always thought the position I wanted was the top dog position, right? That's the best position. But when you really assess all that and all that's involved and what you're going to be a slave to, what you're going to have to do, if that doesn't fit your natural genius or your natural disposition, you will struggle. Like, Bob, you are definitely more effective at the networking piece. Like, that's what you like to do. So you shouldn't struggle against who you are. You should do those things. And I always wanted the luxury. I always wanted the things that came along with success. And I never bothered to value anything else beyond that. And I always was you're always chasing the next best thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of the trap, right?
Yeah, I think it's the trap. And I think the best example of that is the reputation of someone's lawn. Because if you think about it, you know those people that, especially coming from the suburbs, it's nuts. Like, I feel embarrassed just explaining, but people are so obsessed with lawns. Like, you go out and there's a lot of, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, I have to have the
one of those guys.
You were.
Yes.
Oh, well, no,
I was competing with my neighbor.
No, you know, like, who can have the nicest lawn? And then once you're like, oh, I have to have it look a certain way because I care about what someone else thinks, then you have to put in time and you have to buy the right fertilizer and you have to water it a certain way. And you have to, for me, those types of observations create so much more anxiety in life.
Yeah.
So much more pressure, so much more anxiety.
I had a friend ask me about, have you heard of this giving circle? This $1,400 giving circle thing?
I think I have, but yeah, do you want to explain it for?
No, I mean, okay. I'll explain the story.
All right.
A friend approached me and asked if I wanted to give $1,400 to a giving circle, and some way I would get $11,000 back.
Was it a pyramid scheme type of thing, or?
Maybe.
Okay, I don't know. All right.
Like, I realized that if I gave into this, I would have to devote my time to watching my money, to being on some kind of board, and to doing all this other crap that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Well, nah, I'm good. Yeah.
That sounds really sketch, man. That sounds pretty. Yeah, we'll go on from that. Cool. Yeah.
Who is this? Can't see.
Discourses.
Oh, okay. So for the parents who have tuned in, and for those of you who are thinking about how does one become a Stoic, I think this quote from Epictetus clearly explains it. Come now. Wait, I think I've written it wrong. How? Oh, it should say, come now, show me what progress you're making in this regard. Suppose we're talking to an athlete and he said, show me your shoulders. And we were to reply, or he would reply, look at my jumping weights. That's quite enough of you and your weights. What I want to see is what you've achieved by the use of those jumping weights. Take the treatise on motivation and see how thoroughly I've read it. That's not what I'm seeking to know, slave, but how you're exercising your motives to act and not to act, and how you're managing your desires and your aversions, and how you're approaching all of this and how you're applying yourself to it and preparing for it, and whether in harmony with nature or out of harmony with it. Give me evidence of that, and I'll tell you whether you're making progress.
Ooh, that's a good one.
You see, we look for progress where we're not putting any effort, right? We want to be less irritable, but we don't practice at it. When I wanted to bench press 300 pounds, Bob, I was in the gym every day. But when we want to be in the president be in the company of a president of an organization and not feel nervous. We don't know how to practice that, nor do we. So all of this great Stoic stuff really just for most people, and Epictetus even says it, stays right at the door. We listen, we want to talk about it, we can quote some stuff. We sound very impressive and academic, but forget all that. Tell me how you've overcome anger. Tell me what you've done. So a lot of these boards that we're on with Facebook, all these questions, I think people are missing the point.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How many books have you read? It's how did that guy spit on you and you not choke him? Teach me. Oh my God, that's almost godlike. You think about it. For Christians, right? Christianity, turn the other cheek. Bob, I did not understand how to do that until I dug deep into Stoicism. And for individuals who want to live like Jesus lived, live this life of pleasantness and wonder how he did what he did, I guarantee you Epictetus did what he did. You have the ability, we all have the ability to do those things, but it doesn't come cheap, nor does it come easy. And I want people to get, and for anyone interested in trying to do this, and for educators listening who may want to bring us on board, this is an intentional intervention that completely shifts the perspective of how you're doing things. And then over time, you'll be able to measure the progress you're making and how you respond to situations if you're putting yourself in those on a daily basis. And you know, that's what Behavior Minds does, right? That's what we do, right? We set up these artificial situations for you to test yourself so that when the real situation comes up, you've got an example of how to deal with somebody looking at you crazy, or a teacher giving you a grade you don't think you deserve, or
someone taking a much more candy out of the bowl that wasn't theirs.
Exactly. So without practice, these things just kind of pop up on you. And what's the natural response? Well, whatever emotion we're used, whatever habit dictates. If you're usually irritable, you're irritated. If you're quick to anger, you're pissed off. Well, let's create some situations where you can naturally get irritated, but it's in a controlled environment, right?
Yep.
Now we can track progress, because last week you almost choked the kid. This week, you kind of shrug your shoulders.
Yeah.
Once you didn't even notice it.
And
that's the path we're on.
Yeah, for sure. And when we think about students that are, you know, at risk, or even crazier, kids that don't even know that there's another option for the situation, I feel like this situation, not only is it obviously we're kind of prepping with scenarios and things like that, but we're also implementing play, which in a lot of programs has kind of gone, which is sad, and it's much needed for development. And we're also adding this notion of building a culture of wanting to improve, this culture of reflection, this culture of, it's cool. You can, you know, Dobbie wrote and I edited this short novel called Dobbie, what was the title again?
It's Adventures of Lucilius on Progress.
The Adventures of Lucilius on Progress. And we really want to just kind of create this culture of, you're actually, you think it's lame to not be reflective? You think it's lame to not care about what you're thinking all the time? You know, I feel like that's another goal of Behavior Minds, is just to kind of cultivate that, because it is so, even in, you know, adult circles, it's not, you know, a lot of people, they just haven't had that reflective experience before.
This is why the mayor, I don't know, I was watching CNN, and some mayor who was against wearing face masks, he had his covering, and he was saying, I can't breathe.
Oh, wow.
Face mask. Yeah, I mean, it was so insensitive.
Yeah, that's
Oh God, I lost my train of thought. But you're right. Adults don't get this either. Adults don't reflect. And so now we have the non-reflective teaching the kids, and we have the insensitive people who are pretending to be just people of justice and in positions to administer justice, teaching the youth. I mean, it is absolutely absurd that this has been allowed to continue for so long, with the
Yeah.
expectation that change will occur.
Yeah. Yeah. And, there's nothing else I can really say to that. It's beautiful. All right, cool. Is that it?
Hey, I think that's it. That was it.
All right, cool. So yeah, I don't know. Some final thoughts. I don't know. There might be some parents watching this. We're kind of trying to pivot, as we said, COVID-19 hit and a lot of schools are in panic mode, and there's not a lot of listening going on right now just to us because, we're kind of new to the game and we're getting into behavior mods, and we did it. And it seems crazy, but it was only earlier this year. It seems like way longer ago.
Oh.
But yeah, we're really excited to hear what you have to, some feedback that you have. We're really trying to get into part of St. Margaret's learning, virtual learning or face-to-face in some creative way. Other than that, we're just kind of waiting for people to start listening. So that's kind of where we are as a business. And we just applied to Arch Grants. We got that application in, Arch Grants St. Louis Startup Competition. So that's kind of been a weight off our shoulders. That was kind of a lot of work. That was a lot of navigation. And we'd really like to hear back, and hope you enjoyed the episode. I really enjoyed doing this. We might have to do this again.
Yeah, man. We definitely will. And it's funny, like our Facebook Stoic group does this. People. So for those of you not familiar, there's a Stoicism Facebook group, and people will ask questions. Like, there are a lot of new people. Like, I just got into this. How does it work? And there are a lot of people who've been doing it for a while. So the dialogue and conversations are really cool. And I know I enjoy being online and talking, and so does Bob. So to be able to do this face to face with our own discussion on our perspective is fantastic, because it shows, I think, everyone that this is always a work in progress. And I'll kind of finish what I'm saying with this, and I should have written this, I might use this as a quote next week. One of Seneca, somebody that was talking to Seneca said, you talk all this stuff, but let's be honest, Seneca, you're pretty wealthy. You got a great position in life. You got several homes. Like, you are the man. Yet you talk about stoicism and poverty and all this stuff, but it doesn't really match your lifestyle. So what's up? And Seneca said, I'm not a wise man. When I talk about vices and stuff you need to get rid of, I speak of myself first. So it's never this arrogant, judgmental, you're not doing what you need to do. It's always, I'm a work in progress, and I want to show you how to overcome these things through example, not by me spouting off quotes from Seneca, Epictetus, Marcus, and Rufus. Next week, I'm bringing in Rufus, Bob. But it's a commitment to constant attention and awareness to what you're saying, because people interpret it however they interpret it. So be mindful.
Yeah.
Be cautious, as Epictetus says, about what's inside of you, how you speak. Make sure what you're saying is what you want to say. And how people react, your job is to respond accordingly to their reactions. Once you get into the habit of doing this, it becomes very natural.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing that I've just kind of learned about myself in dealing with just being a business partner with Dobbie is that he corrects me, man, and I need to be okay with it. I really need to be okay with his perspective. I need to be okay with criticism. I need to be okay with someone who really has my someone who wants the best for me personally, someone who wants the best for us, for the business, for the mission of changing K-12 schools and the school to prison pipeline, all these big goals. It's really important to be accepting to criticism.
And Marcus Aurelius says that in Meditations. I forgot how he said it, but it's something like, if you criticize me and you have a better answer for the truth, I'm all for it. I'm not about being right. What I'm interested in is what's best for mankind. And I appreciate you saying that, Bob, because I said the same thing to my wife. I think it was last night. I said, babe, when it comes to cooking, I yield. Hey, you are the chef in the house. That's your arena. I'm going to shut up and let you tell me what to do.
I'm bad too, man. I can't. Microwavable stuff is what I got.
But when it comes to the grill, don't talk to me. I got this. But when it comes to overcoming your frustration with people, I got that too. So, as you said earlier, you should yield to or listen to or be open to people who have the expertise or the knowledge in an area that maybe you want or you don't have, or that you're looking to get to, or that's different than yours, that may enrich your own or may make your own better. But you really have to tear down your defenses initially, right?
Yeah.
Humble yourself and be willing to say, or be willing to go back and forth, right? Have a discourse without being angry about it. Have a discussion. The conversation Bob and I had about pleasure and luxury.
Oh, man.
Good stuff.
That was good stuff, man.
And we came to an agreement. But you have to go through the argument. I never thought I would be interested in Socrates and Plato's and in all that stuff. But as I read Socrates' Apology and I read The Republic,
yeah, man,
and I listened to how they broke down a society and they brought up all these arguments. I mean, it's so time consuming, but dude, so beneficial. Like if we could do that for how do we get rid of systemic racism, and not just spend 3 hours in a committee meeting talking about it and get experts who have their own opinion. But I'm talking about, let's spend some better time and let's add some behavior mods to this conversation and have you all look at this differently. We may take 6 months to change this, but the change will be lasting. I'm sick and tired of starting over and over and over and over with new programs that have the same outcome.
Yes.
All right, I'm off my soapbox, Bob.
All right, no, that's cool. I think we can end there. I think ending with Socrates and wrapping it up, that's always a good thing. So we will, I don't know what we're going to do for next. We'll probably have another conversation or two, depending on what you guys respond to, parents out there, if you're listening. So feel free to email us, edubehaviormods@gmail.com. We're always listening to what you have to say. And hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully this was kind of entertaining for you. So yeah, we will keep in touch.
Yep. Man, are you still recording?